Hey guys, welcome back to Matt Keys Fish. Today we are doing a full update on all the stuff I got going on down here, so take a seat or start those water changes. So my intro that you saw there from a few days ago was on the terrarium, so I guess we'll start with the terrarium. There's been a lot of changes, there's been a lot of upgrades to it, and there's been a lot of thought put into it recently. I replaced the infrared light bulb with two different things. I've got the ceramic heat emitter, and I've got the LED bulb, which both fit inside the ZoomEd mini dome. The ceramic heat emitter is 40 watts, and it does a great job of raising the ambient temperatures within the tank to 26 degrees Celsius, which is perfect for the crested gecko. The LED bulb, on the other hand, is great for the philodendron that we now have in there. Although the philodendron is still relatively new, I'm already starting to see the leaves turn to face the LED. The ceramic heat emitter and the LED light are going to last much longer than the infrared light bulb, and they get me out of that gray zone of whether or not infrared light bulbs are bad for your reptiles or not. Junior would still come out during the night, and when the bulb was on during the day, he would still go to sleep during the day, so it didn't really seem to mess with them, but I'll still err on the side of caution. I also got the isopod colony going again, so dwarf whites I did again. They're not the coolest type of isopods, but I did try to do the orange, the powder orange I think they're called, isopods, and I'm pretty sure he ate them all, so that's the end of that story. Dwarf whites are just easier because they're not really noticed by the reptile. They're not really something that they'd want to eat. They're really, really small, and yet they populate very quickly and they can break down waste very quickly, so that's why I went with them. In the last few months, I've also been raising up a springtail culture by putting moldy rice into my wife's plant pot, and that's been going pretty well actually. Just after making the intro, I took some of the dirt from there, making sure to avoid any of the perlite, and I added it to the isopod culture so that I can start culturing them together. Just goes to show that if you're looking for springtails, you probably don't have to look far. Now, another hot topic that will probably rise up a year after I've uploaded this is whether or not it's ethical to keep a crested gecko in a 12 by 12 by 24. In my mind, I thought it would be okay, but I knew that I would need to upgrade. I just never really clued in how long it would take me to upgrade, which is shameful of me to say because this is what I deal with every day with the people that come into my store. They want a fish and the fish is it's gonna be too big, and they say they're gonna upgrade, but then they don't. I kind of did that with the crested gecko, and so I'm trying to figure out how to resolve it. The solution, obviously, is to either get a bigger tank, which I don't know if you see the space I live in, but I don't have the space for that, or I find a new owner, which is just as difficult because crested geckos are like the most popular reptile on the market. So while I'm not able to give him a bigger tank because of my limited space, I'm going to make the tank he has for now as good as possible. So LED lights for live plants, bioactive substrate with a drainage layer and the presence of isopods and springtails, and a heat source that is going to be suitable for tropical nocturnal reptiles like Junior. By the way, if you want to see Junior out and about in another update on my shoulder, then leave it in the comments. I was kind of wary about him coming out this time because the light is quite bright. I'm sure you can see it reflecting in my eyes right now, and I just thought he would kind of be distracting. But if you guys want to see more of him, I can definitely bring him out more often. Now, while I'm maximizing the minimal space that he has, I've also listed him on Kijiji. I'm not in a rush to sell him, to find him a new home, because there's a lot of bad homes out there. And there's a lot of sketchy people on Kijiji. Like, someone even offered me a red-tailed shark to exchange for my gecko, and I'm just like, what? So we could have him for the next 2 years, and by then I'll upgrade him to like a 36 by 36, and he'll be living his best life. And there's an equal chance that somebody from my store that I've talked to, or from Kijiji, will have a suitable home, and I'm more than willing to take him there. If that's the case, Hope has a cute little cube aquarium idea for that corner. I think it's going to be a great contrast for my scapes if that's the case, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, 29-gallon aquarium. Look at that guy. He has so many issues, literally so many complexities. We're going to get to the 20-gallon later, and it's such a simple tank. It's so balanced. 29-gallon, so many issues. It's my problem child. Before we get too deep into it though, we've got a new table back there. Looks really nice. It's not as seamless as the black table was, but it really allows me to get in through there and get to the drawers that are underneath the tank, which I used to have to move the whole table for, so it's not as seamless, but it is a really nice table and it's functional. I actually have enough room now to seat people all around it. It is a really small space. Like, there's a reason I can't have a bigger tank for Junior. So before we get into the really complex complexities, the plants are doing great. They are thriving. It's the one part of this tank that I have no issues with. The water sprite is a great seller. I make at least 30 bucks a month on it. The jungle val is now like 4 feet tall. It's insane. When I do a river tank in the future, I'm definitely taking that out of there and putting it in the river tank because it's going to span across the entire thing. The 2 different swords are doing okay. They're not huge, but they've filled in enough for me. The Java Fern was originally my idea for the leaves coming off this tree fortress. It is the tree fortress aquarium after all. I've kind of abandoned that idea and I've switched out the Java Fern, although it's still there getting swallowed up by pearlweed. Pearlweed looks great. I had it in the vase for a while, if you guys can remember that. And it just looks so delicate, so intricate as the leaves of this tree. It does require a lot of trimming, it does require a lot of pruning and moving and shaping, which I haven't been doing very well lately, but once you do, it just looks gorgeous. As I said, the Java Fern and the branches is pretty much swallowed up. I have taken some of it and I've moved it down to the driftwood on the right and left, and that's doing really well down there actually. Slow growth, but it's doing well. I also have some dwarf Sagittaria that I've been trying to maintain at the front of the tree, and it's doing okay. It gets covered in dust really easily because it's on the bottom, but because I used play sand, there's still a lot of dust everywhere, even though I've been using it for like 3 years. Okay, plants are done. Let's talk about fish and all that's wrong with them. Although you won't see them behind me anymore, we did have 3 stir-by corridors in the 29. These were given to me by my friend Shubi, who had them in a biorb with a lot of mulm that he was trying to keep settled down, and they kept kicking it up, so he gave them to me. But they didn't really do that well for me either. They were kind of stress swimming back and forth for weeks and weeks and weeks, and one eventually got a small infection on the face, and the quarantine tank wasn't free at the time to treat it, so I eventually rehomed them. Even if they weren't hyperactive and they were just chilling on the sandbank, which is what I was expecting them to do, they were kind of crowding it out with the rams and the rainbows being there already, as well as the goby, and they were really struggling to compete for food. Then I got the ghost catfish, or I think I got them before actually. If you look really closely at the back wall, you can probably still see them hanging out there. And that's kind of the reason why I'm having difficulties with them. They are super healthy, they didn't bring parasites with them, they're schooling well, their barbels are full and healthy. But unlike in my 40-gallon aquarium where they were chilling out front and center, and in other people's aquariums where they're front and center, these guys are always in the back. So as cool as they are, it's like they're not even there. Currently they're listed on Kijiji, and I'm hoping to use the money for a nice big school of Beckford's pencilfish. These guys will fit perfectly because they'll be feeding in and among the plants where the other fish wouldn't be feeding. They'll bring cool behaviors like the males reverse sparring, as well as color patterns that'll be unique for the aquarium, such as the iridescent blues on the ventral fins, the red on the caudal fin, and these nice natural colors along the rest of the body. It'll also be a little bit cohesive with the aquarium, not just with the iridescent blues, but also with the small mouth of the pencilfish, kind of like how the Bolivians and the rainbows have a small mouth. While I was at Critter Jungle, I also saw hatchet Danios, which I've never seen before. They have similar sparring behavior. They look like they might be a little bit more feisty, but let me know if you think I should do those in this tank or in a future tank. Next we have the goby, and I'm not sure if I covered it in the last update, but I had 2. I originally bought 4, and now I'm down to 1. You may remember that 2 died in quarantine a while ago, and I only had 2 in the 29 for a while. Well, one of them died, the brighter blue one, the male, I believe. And now I'm just left with the female. I'm not sure how he died, and although parasites would be my first assumption, he was eating well, he never stopped eating, and he was producing good full waste. Yet for some reason he was getting skinny, and eventually he died of it. The last goby, however, doesn't seem to mind being alone, and it's doing just fine. The Bolivian rams are actually doing really well. You may have seen my care guide where I explained that I was trying to treat them and I had 2 left, and it kind of looked like they had parasites again, which they're really known to get. But now they've both gone through a full salt treatment and it looks like they're fine. I'm starting to doubt whether or not they still had parasites after I treated them for Camellias worms the day that I got them. I think that although they may have had them when they were at the store, when I treated them, the worms were gone. And what I thought were worms were really just the points of their anal vent. After doing research for the care guide on how to sex them, I found out that the males have short pointed vents, which kind of makes it look like they have a worm. It wasn't the vent itself that I thought was a worm, it was just because when I used to have rams and the worms would push themselves out of the anus of the fish, they would kind of cause it to prolapse. But in this case, it's not a prolapsed vent, it's just the way it looks for males. And that is not the first time that I've confused something natural for something parasitic. The rainbows, on the other hand, are doing poorly without a doubt. I had lost a few in quarantine, I had lost maybe 2 when they were in the tank, and now I've lost another one just this week. Although one casualty might have been because of the paradise fish that I had for a while and was kind of beating up on one of the fish I had in quarantine, I believe that the rest of the deaths were caused by something called black spot disease. Black spot disease is a parasite that's passed from birds, which defecate in the water. It's picked up by a crustacean or a snail, and then the fish eats the shrimp or the snail and it gets infected with that parasite. Unlike tapeworms and nematodes, which we've dealt with in the past, this is more like ick. It kind of burrows into the skin, and instead of creating these little white tufts, it creates these black splotches. Some people have shown them to be very precise little black splotches, but for me, they kind of look like bruising on the fish. Other symptoms that I've noticed include weird little streamers that kind of look like crushed brine shrimp that gets attached to their fins and gets attached to their nose and gets stuck in their mouth, and they can't really shake off. It doesn't look like the parasite itself, but it might be. But if it is the parasite, then I'm not sure what part of the cycle this is. I've also noticed increased shyness in the fish, although not too much. They are still rainbow fish after all. But they do get startled a little bit more easily, and their breathing appears to be more labored. The series of events for the rainbow fish that have died seems to be that they get fully dark, and then they stop trying to swim. They kind of let themselves drop a little bit, and by the next day, usually it's overnight, they're gone. So I will be moving all the rainbow fish, although there are quite a lot, there's 8 in there right now, into the 5-gallon to be treated for maybe the next month. I'm going to try salt for a couple weeks, see if that works. If it doesn't, then I'm going to try to get some kind of illegal medication up here. And if you guys are freaking out saying, oh my gosh, she's getting illegal medication, it's literally just like the regular stuff you guys in the US have on the pet store shelves. Now, it's not all bad news for the rainbow fish because they had babies. They had probably like 30 fry, and I'm just like, I was literally just doing water change, and I start to see these little squiggly things, and I'm like, did I get like some kind of parasite? Did I get some kind of worm? But I look close, and it's a fish, and immediately I'm like, it's gotta be the rainbow fish, right? I guess they spawned, and somehow all these eggs hatched without being eaten, and all these fry are swimming around without being eaten, and I'm just like, whoa. So I left them in there, and I'm just like, I guess they'll just grow up beside their parents, and they'll hide in the foliage. But I was a little bit too optimistic, because the next day I look over while I'm watching a show, and yeah, they're eating pretty much all their fry. But only pretty much all their fry, because I managed to save 5 of them, and they are safely in the quarantine tank being raised up on bug bites. I know that there's powdered foods, and there's like gel foods, and there's lots of different things that I can feed them. Baby brine shrimp, for example, but I don't really want to get that far into it, because I know if I'm breeding baby brine shrimp, it's going to be like 1,000 shrimp, and I only have 2 tanks, so I just think it would be a waste of money, because I'm probably not going to do this ever again, since the pencil fish will be in there and they'll be snacking on any little eggs. I'm powdering fish flakes. They've been alive for weeks now, which tells me that it's working, and they should be adults by this time next year. So rainbow fish apparently take a very long time to grow out. So my guess is they're going to be back and forth from quarantine to the main tank. Maybe spend a little bit of grow out time in the 20-gallon, and then eventually they will enter the 29-gallon with the rest of the school. But it's going to take a while. Okay, 20-gallon aquarium, my favorite child, at least so far. I mean, this was supposed to be my masterpiece, but this is definitely so much more stable, and I've come to enjoy it more and more as I've grown with it. Once again, we'll start with the plants. They're all doing really well. Like I said in the last update, they're all really slow growing plants, so that's what they're doing. In fact, I've replanted them in the last video, and they've only really started to sprout up new leaves now, and it's like a month later. The only thing that's not growing steadily better and better is the Java fern. It hasn't really moved, and I guess that cements its place as a highlight plant. Even though it still like stays alive in low light, it's gonna grow in highlight. On to the livestock. Not that the plants aren't live, but you get what I mean. The shrimp are doing, they're not doing that well. They're not breeding as readily as back when I had like 3 ember tetras in the aquarium, but they are still alive. They're still here. They've kind of done their own selective breeding, because I used to have some blacks and some borderline like blues and greens, but now it's all kind of like brown and yellow and stuff like that. Stuff that's really going to blend in well now that I took away most of the plants. But hopefully when the plants grow in, especially the Swassertang, which is just going to be this carpet over all the gravel within the crypt, the shrimp population is going to start going up. The assassin snails were originally going to be my cash cow before the water sprite chipped in, and they have not owned up to that at all. They are the worst. They're not even eating the pond snail that I put in there. But despite them breeding all the time and them laying eggs everywhere, which I posted videos on, the eggs just kind of disappear after a while, and I've been trying to figure out what eats them. I've reasoned that it must be the anchor catfish because they're the only ones that are a good enough scavenger and have the tools to crush up the baby snails as soon as they leave the egg. So if that's the case, I'm going to move them over to the 5-gallon to hatch out because I'm not getting any of them from the 20-gallon. Although I guess at this point, if they're not good snail eaters and if people are catching on to that, then there's probably not going to be a market for them in the future. Remember, just because an animal can do something doesn't mean that it wants to. The other fish are so uncomplicated. I lost one Ember Tetra, I think, a month ago, and the other 13 have been doing super well. The largest female just continues to get bigger and more colorful day after day. The Celestial Pearl Danios, I haven't lost a single one of those guys, and they are sparring every day, which is super cool to look at. They're probably having lots of eggs, which are all immediately eaten. And then there's the honey gourami, who really wants a female. Although I can't really get it on camera because it spooks him, he gets really dark on the face and dark on the throat and on the front of the anal fin. He's been building bubble nests constantly, and he's kind of been half-heartedly chasing the other fish away from it. He's really got some hormones running through him. And so I'm wondering if at some point, maybe not now, maybe when the plants have grown in more, if I should introduce a female honey gourami just to kind of get to that next level. Next we have the anchor catfish, and you guys know that I love these guys. I love camouflaged fish, and boy do they ever camouflage. I never see these guys out. Sometimes when I do a water change, I have to like poke around to see if I still have 3 alive because I'm always worried they've died. But even though they are very reclusive and I only see them out in the open maybe once a month, I do love seeing them at night. It's been my new favorite thing to feed bloodworms, come back half an hour later, and just watch all of them roam around in the darkness. It's really cool. Anyways guys, that's it for this update. So if you liked it, leave a like. If you want to see more updates like this and care guides, subscribe, and I will see you guys on a Sunday.